against the Volunteers this upcoming weekend to kind of right the ship a little bit, because again, that's something that Gamecock baseball has been struggling with here as of late. We know they were able to dispatch of the easier teams. They've played the mid majors and so forth pretty handily there in those first couple of weeks of play. But once you got into playing actually the ranked teams and the teams that are going to present a challenge to you, as we've talked about many times this week, you're 1-9. You are 1-9 overall against those teams that only win coming against Oklahoma in the middle game of that series, and obviously you blew the third game of that one, and then got swept by Arkansas last week. Go out there in the midweek against North Carolina. You walk up a ton of batters, give up 13 runs. It's just it's not been good as of late, and you need something to get yourself back on track. And again, you would ideally not be playing the number one team in the country in Tennessee coming up this weekend, but that's the card that you're dealt. And again, as Coach Maneri said, the SEC is tough, and nobody's shying away from that. And you got to kind of deal with the challenge that puts ahead of you. So the next one's going to be Tennessee, and we'll see how South Carolina does. And then you got Mississippi States and the Floridas and all those teams coming after that. But this weekend's either going to get you back on track, it's going to put you behind the 8 ball once again. And hopefully we have some good things to talk about come Monday when it comes to what happens out at Founders Park this upcoming weekend. Ball, the first pitch for that game coming up tonight at 7:00, which we'll have for you right here on 107.5 The Game. And depending on women's basketball this weekend, we'll kind of keep you updated on what's going on with where you can hear the rest of the games this weekend as those are happening. But one thing that has kind of been the headline of the week is what's going on with Dylan Eskew, who, again, over the weekend got hit on the head when he was in the bullpen warming up or throwing some warm-up pitches on Saturday out there at Arkansas when the offense was taking BP out there on the field. And Coach Maneri yesterday, in talking to the media, gave a little more detail on what exactly happened there. And it's as bizarre as it sounded like before. But here's cut number 2, Dave. Let's get a little more detail from Coach Maneri on what exactly happened with Dylan Eskew and his injury over the weekend.
Dylan Eskew is going to be out for a while. It's the craziest thing ever. He's out in the outfield. You were there, Jack.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were there during batting practice. He's in the bullpen behind the left field fence during batting practice doing some pitching drills. He's throwing a weighted ball into the wall, and one of our batters hits a ball out of the park and hits him right on the top of the head. And he's supposed to start the game tomorrow, the Sunday's game. And anyway, he started having issues with it, and you had to go into concussion protocol, and consequently he wasn't even cleared until yesterday. But he was starting to have some problems with his side a little bit. When I noticed it when he was playing catch a couple of the days earlier, he was like just doing some stretching like this. I said, "You having problems?" He said, "No, I'm just a little tight. I'm just stretching." But when that ball hit him, the way his body reacted to it, I think it irritated him, and now he's got an oblique problem. So
Jeez.
Those obliques are tricky. You don't think it's it's just an oblique, but they're kind of like groin problems. They take longer than you think. So I don't know how long he's going to be out, but unfortunately we won't have him this weekend for the foreseeable future. Craziest thing I've ever seen. How does a guy get hit in the head doing pitching drills when he's 350 feet away from home plate,
And again, that was Coach Maneri yesterday, kind of detailing the Dylan Eskew injury. And Jack, you were right there when he was talking about that. And it's as insane as it sounded over the weekend when we got the news.
It was just it just keeps getting crazier. And honestly, man, I just don't believe how it could possibly happen, because it's like it's not just his. I mean, he cleared concussion protocol 2 days ago.
Right.
It's what happened after. It's his oblique now, and I'm thinking that the ball hit him in the right spot in the head to where he like I don't know,
the way it correlates with the rest of your body,
yes,
right?
Yes,
your what, frontal lobe,
yes,
cortex, or I'm not a brain doctor.
Neither am I.
That sounds smart, right?
It does sound smart. It was just again, man. Like, how often does this happen? Let alone I would have thought he had a concussion. But
Yeah.
the fact that he's
By the way, we're being graced by Bob in Columbia, in case you didn't hear the call in at the end of Bill's show.
really okay.
We got a known heckler.
Yeah,
A known
I look
heckler
forward
around
to
here.
But yeah, no, it's such a weird injury, man. And now he's gonna be out for a while, man.
Yeah.
If that hadn't even happened, if he just cleared concussion protocol, I think he'd be starting this weekend. Like Maneri's initial plan was to start him, I think, on Saturday. But
Sure.
it is what it is, man. And now you just got to hope for the best with everyone else.
Well, now you've kind of shifted around your starting lineup. You're going to have Jake McCoy going tonight, Jarvis Evans getting another start on the weekend coming up tomorrow. Then our favorite TBA is going to start on Sunday.
Yes, famous TBA, as Paul Maneri puts it. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do on Sunday yet. I think it just depends on what you do Friday and Saturday. Because let's say Jake McCoy and Jarvis Evans don't go super long. I would imagine Brandon Stone will start or pitch in one of these games, and then potentially Matthew Becker. And where does that leave you for Sunday? I think that gives you limited options. And the hope, I think, is that you get five or six good innings out of both guys. You can use your middle relievers. Maybe you use Stone or Becker in one of these games. And then I think you try to maybe pitch. Me personally, I would throw Becker on Sunday. I just think he needs an opportunity to get back out there. And he's shown he can be really good. It's just these last few outings have been really rough, albeit in some really awful spots to be in.
Well, and there's also a level of concern as well with rolling Jake McCoy out there as your Friday night starter, given how his weekend start last weekend went. So it's like, okay, was that an anomaly, or is that what he's going to be against a team that's maybe even better? Actually even better at hitting than Arkansas is.
I think it's an anomaly. I just think his stuff plays very well. He's got better stuff than most guys on this team, and I think it plays well for being a Friday night guy. He's got the right energy and mindset to be one of these guys, and I just think the big thing for him, we've seen it. He pitched like so well against Clemson, the 12 strikeout game. He has done pretty well. He did all right against Oklahoma. Like the Arkansas game, being on the road and stuff, that was just a really rough game for him. I think he bounces back, and look, I mean, is it going to be perfect tonight? Probably not, but I just think he has the right stuff to be, the guy for them.
And like you mentioned, Brandon Stone moving back to the bullpen, and again, he showed you so much coming out of the bullpen, and he earned the opportunity to get the starts that he's had. And again, mixed bag results. Didn't start great 2 weeks ago. Ended up being okay in the innings after that. Started okay last week. Ended up kind of falling apart in the third inning. Wasn't helped out by some defensive issues there as well. But he seems to maybe be a guy that's just more comfortable in the bullpen. And if that's the role that he's going to thrive in, put him there.
I think he's better suited out of the bullpen. Like, I think he's your guy to be first up out of relief. However it goes, maybe honestly, if you can get this might be wishful thinking, but get 6 innings out of Jake.
Sure.
You're in a close game and then bring Stone in for the 7th, 8th, and 9th. That would be good.
After the last couple of weeks, any starter going 6 innings is going to be welcome.
That's going to be wishful thinking, I fear. I mean, look, this Tennessee team is very, very good. And,
they're good at everything.
They're good at everything. They're just
when you're the number one team, you should be.
Yes, you should be. So it's going to be a challenge, man. But I think it does help that it's at home. I don't really think it's going to be a great turnout this weekend. Not just because women's basketball is going on. I just mainly think a lot of people just really don't have the desire to be at the ballpark. And we'll see how South Carolina responds after such a tough weekend, a tough week in general. And it'll be really important for them to find a way to – it's going to be hard, but win this series maybe.
You have to win the series. I led the show off with that. You have to find a way to win 2 out of 3. Again, that seems like a daunting task considering it's the best team in the country, defending national champions, but for the sake of the rest of your season, because if you come out of this, you'd be if you got swept, you'd be 1-8 in conference play.
If you won a game, you'd be 2-7.
Still, that's a mountain to climb.
I feel like if you win a game this weekend, it's much more manageable to come back here. Because again, if you win a game this weekend and then let's say Mississippi State is struggling. They lost again last night. They're 1-6 now, and then A&M's 0-6 right now. You find a way to win those series. You have 5 wins under your belt.
Sure.
In the next 3 weekends. That's not bad, but it's like you gotta. It doesn't look good right now.
Yeah.
So there's time to turn around here, but you really would like to get a series win this weekend.
We'll talk about it a little bit more at the bottom of the hour with our guy Stuart Lake from the Gamecocks Radio Network. Coming up next, we're talking with Elijah Campbell out in Birmingham about The Sweet 16 as women get set to take on Maryland coming up today at 5 o'clock. But before we hit the break, today's a very special day, Jack. It is my niece's 8th birthday.
Ooh.
And when your niece requests a shout out on the radio for her birthday, you have to give it to her. Clementine, happy birthday. Cannot wait to see you this weekend. You know Uncle Ty's got some cool stuff for you. So we'll see you this weekend. Happy 8th birthday. And again, fulfilling one of your birthday wishes of having a shout out on the radio so far.
The man of the people.
I try my best. You got to be the cool uncle. You an uncle yet?
Yeah. Nah, not yet. So.
You will be one day.
Someday.
You got to be the cool uncle.
Yes,
you gotta
absolutely.
You got to do things like this.
For sure.
So happy birthday, Clementine. I'll see you coming up later on this weekend. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Beltry broadcasting live out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic going until noon here in the game.
This just in, AAA Heating and Air continues to dominate the Midlands with the best HVAC replacement options around. With guaranteed financing, 12 months, no payments or interest, and a 15 years parts and labor warranty, they're setting the standard for new system installations. But did you know they also have great deals on repairs? That's right. If your system is broken and you're short on cash, AAA Heating and Air can still help. They offer up to 12-month payment plans with no credit check required on repairs. So all you need is a valid bank account. That's it. So don't delay. Call AAA Heating and Air today. Whether it's a replacement or a repair, they've got the deal you need.
Hold on. We got our wires crossed here. That's this one. So that. All right. Test. That's better. Okay. And you said there's 2 rejoiners for Elijah, right? Okay. No, I think you can take the first rejoiner out and just have the Elijah one. That should be fine. Because we don't. Yeah, it's coming straight in. Yeah, we're going to talk to him. But like the rejoiner should be part of the coming back from commercial, right? Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're going to like intro him, obviously, but the rejoiner is part of coming back in from break. All right. And then you got Stuart Lake's number, right? We talked to him at 9:30. All right. I'll let you know I'm very guest heavy today because I'm doing 10 to 12 by myself. So I got a lot of guests. Yeah, I got the lives. Cool.
This is for the.
It's for Charwood.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher broadcasting live out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic. That's just the start of a very exciting day across all of Columbia and all of Gamecock sports. Of course, we got baseball in action this weekend, taking on the number one team in the country in Tennessee. And of course, later on this afternoon at 5 o'clock, we have the tip between South Carolina and Maryland in the Sweet 16, the 11th straight year that Dawn Staley's crew's been able to make the Sweet 16. Joining us now, either in Birmingham or on the road to Birmingham. It sounds like he's still driving. Elijah, where exactly are you at and joining us from right now?
We are getting a little closer to that Georgia-Alabama border, so I should be in Birmingham pretty closely. It's an easy drive, straight shot on 20 West, and where I'm staying is right off the interstate. So I'm not too far away from the destination.
I will tell you one time I proudly hit the Alabama line from the state of Georgia, and as I did that, Sweet Home Alabama came on my playlist. I did not time it that way. It just happened. So hopefully you can have as good a fortune as I did that day.
Oh, it might. I've got the old Spotify day list on. That's usually a good one to have in the background as you're driving. So who knows? That might pop up.
We'll see. Again, later on this afternoon, South Carolina and Maryland. South Carolina is the 17.5-point favorite. But as we all saw the other day, this is a scrappy and resilient Maryland team coming down from 17 points down against Alabama to win that double overtime thriller in the second round the other day. Where can Maryland give South Carolina problems today, Elijah?
A lot of it's going to be the biggest opportunity for them to get South Carolina problems is on the offensive glass. So this is a top 15 offensive rebounding unit in America. It's one of the reasons why they're such an efficient offense. According to Martin Torvik, they're the fifth most efficient offense in women's college basketball, and that's just one of their MOs. Like they also drive to the basket really well. So if South Carolina can cut away straight line drives, which they do really well, I will say, and South Carolina's the best defense in the country because there's not a player in college basketball that's just going to simply beat Bree Hall off of the dribble and get to the paint. That just rarely happens. Or Raven Johnson, or Tessa Johnson, or Mylasia Fulwiley. Like South Carolina's guards are so good, so I don't foresee that part of Maryland's offensive strength giving Carolina a ton of trouble. But what can is second chances, and that's really Maryland's big path to making this thing a little scary for the Gamecocks. If they have the ability to create second chances on the board, they're going to be able to sneak into this game. And they got to play better defense if you're Maryland. If you're Brenda Freeze, you're really trying to concoct a game plan that kind of mimics what Indiana did on Sunday, where you take away South Carolina's drives into the lane, you double the post, you make all entry passes into the post more difficult than they have to be. And then maybe if you slow South Carolina down offensively, then maybe your inability to drive all over the place doesn't hinder you too much. But really, the big pathway for me is if South Carolina keeps Maryland off the offensive glass, they should have a pretty easy way in this game. But if Maryland's able to create second chance points and maybe get some of, a Sanaya Fagan or Chloe Kent in foul trouble and make Carolina have to continue digging into the bench, which isn't an issue for Carolina, but if you kind of force Dawn's hand in terms of substitution, maybe they can hang around.
What's up, Elijah? It's Jack here. Talking a little bit more about Maryland specifically here. They've got some really good scorers on their team. I mean, they have three, scoring over 10 points a game, and their league scorers averaging 18 points. Who do you feel like, if South Carolina is going to win this game? I know you mentioned rebounding is a huge thing in this game, but preventing these second chance points. Who's one player in particular that South Carolina really needs to hone in on from Maryland and kind of slow down in this game?
Yeah, what's up, Jack? Yeah, good talking to you, buddy. And that's a really good question. This is a Maryland team that they do have some scoring versatility. I think the toughest player, though, in terms of like who they need to stop and not have like a crazy day, because this player is certainly capable of having a crazy day, it is going to be Sellers. I mean, Cheyenne Sellers is really one of the more gifted three-level scorers in the game of women's college basketball. I mean, reliable three-point shot. She can hit the mid-range really well. She can take over a game. And I know Saylor Poffenbarger is probably their best lights-out three-point shooter. And normally reliable on the free throw line. I mean, she's almost like a 90% free throw shooter. And in the Alabama game, missed a couple of big ones late to kind of let Alabama hang around in those overtimes. But really, the two that I look at, just because of the skill set needed to pull off an upset, like Sellers crashes the glass really well too. Cheyenne Sellers is certainly the 1A in this discussion, just because of her ability to score at all three levels, and maybe having the greatest potential of scoring 30 if she needs to. And then Saylor Poffenbarger, because when she gets hot from the outside, it can make life pretty hard for any team they play against. And that really is kind of what elevates Maryland as a whole.
Going to talk to Elijah Campbell out in Birmingham, getting set for the Sweet 16, which gets rolling later on today. South Carolina, Maryland will be game number 2. We have Tobacco Road, the women's edition, leading things off at 2:30 this afternoon between Duke and North Carolina. And, of course, South Carolina wins. They will take on the winner of that game as well. Is there a preference in matchup on either one of those teams for South Carolina? I know we've already seen one of them earlier on this year.
Yeah, so I feel like Duke's the better team. And maybe you'd rather see North Carolina because you haven't seen them this year. You haven't seen this rendition of North Carolina. This rendition of North Carolina hasn't seen you, right? I do think, Kara Lawson is a coach that I think is a good enough coach to where she's going to learn a lot of lessons from that first meeting. And I know Kara Lawson was very pleased with how they played when they came up to Columbia earlier in the season and gave the Gamecocks everything they could possibly handle in that game. And it took a closing time Chloe Kitt takeover in the fourth quarter of that game for Carolina to end up winning comfortably. They had a big lead. Duke cut it down back to single digits. Closing time Chloe came in, pushed it back out. So while it looked like a comfortable win, it's one of those things that I think Kara Lawson's a good enough coach to be able to make the proper adjustments to maybe have a better ability to scare you than the way North Carolina would. I think North Carolina's a fine thing. They're greatly improved from last year, are the Tar Heels. But if I have a preference in this matchup, it's that North Carolina pulls off the upset and that you see the Tar Heels, as opposed to seeing a team like Duke, who does, I believe, have a higher three-point ceiling than what the Tar Heels can possibly provide. Because when Duke gets hot from deep, they have a couple of girls on that team, man, that have the capability of hitting 5 or 6 threes in a game against them. And that would be the worst case scenario, is to get into a game where you might not be shooting as great as you normally do and the other team can't miss. I just think there's a higher probability of that happening with Duke as opposed to UNC.
Got another minute here, Elijah, just real quick. You go back to that Maryland Bama game. I mean, that was just an absolute classic, as Tyler mentioned earlier. Yes, really good game. But how much does the whole rest factor play into this game? Like, does it really matter all that much that South Carolina is getting an additional day of rest? Or, I mean, do you expect both teams to be coming out here playing equally as good?
Your best answer in about 45 seconds.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it probably matters a lot in the margins. Like, when it comes down to the fourth quarter of this game, that fatigue might set in. And, of course, that's obviously an advantage South Carolina because of the extra day of rest. They didn't have to play an additional 10 minutes of basketball in their game. And the fact that they just have about 9 McDonald's All-Americans and 10 players in the rotation that they play throughout the course of the game. South Carolina is going to easily be the fresher team. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see the point spread being where it is, which is right around 17.5. So I think it matters marginally, but maybe just not as much as the overall depth that Carolina has over there.
And quickly before I let you go, those great sponsors that are allowing you to be out in Birmingham this weekend.
Yeah, we have a ton of friends that are allowing me to be out here this weekend. Hilton Garden Inn, Peak Drifting, Columbia Craft, Atkins Law, Lexington Discount Homes. The best of the best of the best. My friends, they should be your friends too. They let me get to do a lot of the cool stuff around here. So thanks to those guys for allowing me to hang out in Birmingham this weekend.
Safe travels, get there, and we'll check in with you a little bit later on in the day.
Sounds good, fellas. Take it easy.
Elijah Campbell on the road to Birmingham. We'll talk Gamecock baseball. Stuart Lake coming up next here on the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack at Charwood Golf Club for the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic here on the Game. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Ed and Jack Beltry live at the 107.5 Games Spring Golf Classic at Charwood Golf Club here in West Columbia, and time to talk some more Gamecock baseball. Always appreciate our guy Stuart Lake from the Gamecocks Radio Network checking in with us again this week. Stuart, hope you're doing well today, and hope you're doing well, better than the team has fared as of late. We've talked about this a lot this week. Where's your level of concern at with this baseball team as they've obviously been scuffling out of the gate in conference play?
Yeah. Well, obviously concerned when you don't get the wins. It's really just such a tough draw out of the gate. That Oklahoma series I thought was our best chance to win a series, maybe in the first 3 or 4 series. And when we let that one slip away on that Sunday, I felt like we kind of took us a little while to get over that one. But a couple things, you start looking at it, pitching it starts for me. Just too many free bases. I was looking at comparing us to Tennessee. We've walked 108. Guys, they've only walked 68. We've hit 32. They've hit 24. But if we're going to have a good chance against them this weekend, we're going to really have to minimize those free bases we're giving their offense.
Hey, Stuart, it's Jack here. And you mentioned minimizing the free bases. I feel like, with the rotation changes, obviously, Jake McCoy going Friday, Jarvis going Saturday. We don't know about Sunday yet. How do you feel like that kind of sets up in terms of getting better outings on the mound? Because obviously last week, and honestly, for the most part, recently, there have been a lot of short outings on the mound.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact of Evans in that rotation. I've liked him all year from when he went from midweek starter, especially last Sunday on short notice, what he did out there. And I like the fact that Stone, I assume now, is back in the bullpen with his name not mentioned in a rotation, even though we got TBA on Sunday. But so I'm thinking, y'all have heard me say it before. I was a left-handed hitter, so left-handed pitchers I always feel good about. Then I look at Tennessee's numbers. They're actually hitting 333 versus lefties this year and 319 versus righties. So I'm not sure how much that left-handed factor will have to do with slowing their offense down, but I do like the fact that we're trying to make those changes and allow ourselves to maximize our bullpen in the games we have to win.
Talking to Stuart Lake, the Gamecocks Radio Network, getting set for South Carolina and Tennessee coming up this weekend. A weird situation with Dylan Eskew and the injury on Saturday, and not being able to go Sunday. Jarvis Evans thrust into that starting role and went out there and actually did a pretty solid job. And again, is going to be in the rotation coming up this weekend. How do you assess how he fared out there, given the fact that he woke up Sunday morning not knowing he was probably going to be starting that game?
Well, not only that, he'd throw 80-plus pitches in the middle of the week and done a great job in that start. And then, he's probably going to bed. Maybe he knew Saturday night at the earliest that something was going on, but he certainly woke up Saturday morning thinking, first trip here I've been on the roster on the road. Maybe I'm in relief. Maybe I'm getting really throw my bullpen to set me up to pitch against North Carolina on Tuesday. Next thing you know, he's on the mound. And I thought he did a great job. I mean, anytime your starter gives you a chance to win a game late in the game, and we were tied in the 8th inning. Now, obviously, he'd come out before that, but I tip my hat to a starter when you get an opportunity to win a game late.
Stuart, when you look at, there's obviously a lot going on with this team right now. The pitching, you mentioned the walks have been a lot. I actually thought the offense making the comeback to tie the game the other day gives you a little bit of hope, because now they've done that in 2 straight games where they fought back to tie the game. They just couldn't get the job done. So when you look at the issues that this team has, I know Paul has talked about before, you kind of just are what you are. Do you kind of get the same sense that you feel that way about this group, or do you feel like there's a way to change, some of the issues that they have?
Well, offensively, I've been wanting Ethan Petry in that 2-hole, and I was excited to see that. I think it just gives him a chance to follow Nathan Hall and kind of get the offense going. But I mean, the numbers that always stand out. I look at certain things all the time. I look at runners in scoring position. We're hitting 270. Tennessee's hitting 325. Those are numbers that are important to me. On base percentage, we're yet to get to 400. They're 461. And then the number that I always tried to really look, if we could be right at 500, I'm excited in our slugging. We're at 435. Tennessee 621. So offensively, we're not a running team. We do a great job running inside the bases, and what I mean from first to third and scoring from second. But we're not really a stolen base team. Neither is Tennessee. But we're just really, I think the best opportunity you have this weekend is for Tennessee to give you some of those free bases. And like the other night, Jack, in that comeback, You gotta put hits together, and the home runs were really good early because we just hadn't had a lot of home runs lately.
Again, talking Gamecock baseball with Stuart Lake of the Gamecocks Radio Network. I always love getting your perspective as a coach yourself when you're having issues in the middle of the season. Again, we know there's practice, we know there's warm-ups for the games and all that kind of stuff. How much can really be corrected when you're having, only a couple days between games?
It's not a lot. I mean, and I don't think there's just, quote, physical issues with this team. Right now, and Coach Maneri is great at this, there's just a lack of self-confidence. I mean, you look at this schedule coming right out of the SEC, you could easily be 4-11 in these first 15 games, and that don't mean you're bad. It just means you've run into really the Arkansas and the Tennessee. Then you go on the road. They're nowhere harder to play than Mississippi State. And then A&M, none of us know what's going on there. So, I mean, it's really now a case of what I would do, and I know the coaches are doing it, just trying to just be so confident, maybe switch up some things, maybe do a different type BP or timing, but there's not a lot of physical you can change. And again, I don't think it's a ton. Now, on the mound, there could be, because the hit by pitches and the walks I know are concerning to all of them.
With the offense, you mentioned what needs to probably change or anything. Do you almost feel like it could help if they work the count a little bit more, got on base via walks? They were doing a very good job of that at the beginning of the year, but once they've started getting into SEC play and stuff, and Paul doesn't really like to walk, obviously, as we know, it's kind of been less walks, more so just singles and stuff. Do you feel like that would really help things if they were working the count, getting pitchers out of games in the 5th, 6th inning and getting on base?
Well, you'd certainly love to do it, but Jack, you nailed it. I mean, guys, I remember opening weekend, Coach Maneri started immediately saying, I'm not into walks. People don't come to the ballpark to see us walk. I want you to earn a walk. I don't want you going to the plate to just get a walk. So I think his mentality is swing. So it would be really hard right now on a hitter if that's what he's preached all along to now change. But yes, I would love to see deeper counts. And I know there's some guys in our lineup. I feel like Evan Stone and those guys will do that for you. But I don't think that's Coach Maneri's really mental approach is that. So that would be hard to change right now.
Again, number 1 Tennessee coming in town this weekend, defending national champions. They're good at pretty much everything. Where can South Carolina make themselves competitive against this team this weekend when you look at the scouting report?
Well, it's going to be these first few innings. I told Derek on Sunday after what we'd gone through Friday and Saturday, if we can look up in the 4th inning and be in this game, we got a chance. Because this team, our team, is resilient. And we looked up, and Derek said it to me off the air, hey, don't look up now, but we're in this thing. And that's why that Sunday game, until the kind of implosion in the 8th inning, got us. But we're going to have to hit. This is a team, I'm telling you, is going to be super impressive to you offensively. They're coming in here, I think they're 3rd in the league in batting average, 2nd in home runs. They've got 61 home runs. We've got like 23. I mean, so it's a big deal. They're 2 in slugging. Now, the one good thing, they don't really run. So they're not going to really press you on the bases. They just try to more station to station and hit the ball out of the ballpark. But we're going to have to match them on the mound and give ourselves our offense, because I just don't think we can beat these guys 13-12.
Stuart, appreciate your time as always. Hopefully it'll be a good weekend at Founders Park, and we'll have some more positive things to talk about next week.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and we're going to get after them this weekend. That's the key to this league. Just keep showing up, and these guys have done that.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time, Stuart.
Thank y'all.
Stuart Lake from the Gamecocks Radio Network. Again, things get rolling tonight at 7 o'clock out at Founders Park. Pre-game coverage starting at 6:45 right here on The Game. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 1. Wild night of the Sweet 16, night number 1 in men's basketball. We'll highlight some of those games coming up next. It's the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack are broadcasting live at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic, which is benefiting the Lexington County Gamecock Club. Want to give a couple different shout outs for the folks that are providing meals for us today. Hudson's Firehouse, Saki, Rock for cooking up these amazing sausage and onions, which we've been chowing down on this morning. Also, thanks to our whole sponsors and American Leak Detection, Empire Drywall and Construction, Nucor, and Southern Shores Dental as well. Appreciate all of you for allowing us to be out here and putting this whole program together. You're chowing on the wings. How are those? Those are massive wings, by the way.
Massive.
Those
They're
are
very,
huge.
very good wings, but so massive, man. Like,
What's the sauce?
It's almost like a tangy,
Okay.
I don't even know if maybe a little bit of barbecue, like a sweeter sauce. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's kind of like the same as the sausage a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, but very good though. Very good. And
sausage is amazing.
Yeah, the sausage is amazing. So yeah, shout out to the sponsors for all this. It's been great out here, man.
It absolutely has. Speaking of great, we got some great basketball last night with men's Sweet 16 getting rolling. Did you have Alabama making a record number of three-pointers and routing BYU on your bingo card?
When I saw the final box score watching that game, and I see they went 25 of 51 from three-point range.
They're an NBA team.
It's insane. It's insane. And it would be a real disappointment if this team doesn't get to the national championship game because they are so good offensively.
It's almost a shame, and I get it because Alabama's a 2 seed, but it's almost a shame that we have to have Alabama and Duke in the Elite Eight instead of potentially the national championship. Because that has potential to be game of the tournament on Saturday.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's the one thing that does worry me about Alabama, and I think it always has, is that they're such a good offense. We know this.
Yeah.
They can outscore anyone.
Yes.
But let's say they face a team that is pretty good defensively. Let's say they get held to about, 85 points. Like Duke can go out there and score a ton.
Sure.
And given that Alabama's defense is not that good, they allow 81 points a game. If Duke catches them to, holds them to a certain number of points, 51 points in the first half, 62 in the second half, that's not always going to happen. So you really need to hope if you're Alabama, you can score enough to, outweigh what happens defensively.
Yeah. Again, take the over in that game. It's going to be wild, get me nuts.
Take the over.
To no surprise, Cooper Flagg goes off last night, 30 points in the 100-93 win for Duke over Arizona. And then if you stayed up late enough for it, the wildest game of the night, overtime victory, Texas Tech ending the little Cinderella run of John Calipari's Arkansas team. No more double-digit seeds alive anymore.
What happened to Arkansas, man? They had this game, they were up by a good bit in the second half, and then just Texas Tech stormed back. And I really did think I thought Arkansas was going to win this game, honestly, last night. But, look, Texas Tech pulling off a real big comeback there.
And then the first game of the night, Florida ends up pulling away from Maryland, 87-71 there. Again, the Terps with head coach there and Kevin Willard and all the drama surrounding him. I don't know if that was a distraction or not. Florida's obviously a really, really good team. And I think most of us had them winning this game, which they did, and now advance on to the Elite Eight.
Probably a little bit of a distraction, I would say. It's never ideal when your head coach is, being asked questions about the stuff. And after the game, he says, I don't know what I'm doing, talking to my agent and all that. But look, the fact of the matter is we both know this from watching them play South Carolina this year. Florida's a very good team. No doubt about it. And they got bigs. They got good guard play. Just a very good all-around team.
Coming up later on tonight, or later on this afternoon, you'll get the second set of the Sweet 16 games with Ole Miss and Michigan State at 7:09, Tennessee, Kentucky at 7:39, the Michigan and Auburn at 9:39, and the nightcap being Purdue and Houston at 10:09 p.m. So again, no Cinderellas left standing. You get a lot of highly ranked, highly seeded teams. And again, if last night was any indication, we're in for a good set of basketball games coming up tonight.
Yeah, I always like seeing Cinderellas in the Sweet 16, but not this year.
That's usually where the clock strikes midnight, right?
Yes, this is So
exactly.
Let's get some competitive basketball tonight.
Little old Arkansas and Calipari, their dreams have now died.
Yep. So it's time for the big boys to go out there and play.
That's right. That'll do it for hour number one. Again, 2 more hours to go here for the Extra Point and Gamecock Central takeover out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic, benefiting the Lexington County Gamecock Club. It's our head here for our friends over at Twin Peaks. We are officially in the season of Lent, and it's Friday. And if you aren't able to eat meat, Twin Peaks has got you covered. You can grab a beer battered fish and chips combo for a light and fresh fare that never skimps on flavor. This beer battered cod is served with house-made tartar sauce, malt vinegar, and French fries. You can score that along with a 22-ounce Miller Lite or Coors Light for just $12 every Friday through Easter, or grab it with a soda or a tea for just $10. Again, they got you covered all Lent season long, leading up to Easter here coming up in a couple weeks. But of course, in the midst of all this great basketball action, there's no better place to park yourself than with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. TVs as far as the eye can see, tons of delicious food, and of course those 29-degree draft beers. All that and so much more with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. All right, see ya. Thanks. And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyra Head hanging out with you on your Friday here on the game. We are at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. It is the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic. Horn sounded about 30 minutes ago after Bill talked for like an hour, and saw the golf carts take off. So everybody out there on the course. Beautiful day for golf, by the way. Plenty of sunshine, nice weather, and looking forward to being out here for the rest of the day and hanging out, playing some golf. Corey Parson joining me now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Time to run the numbers once again, as he, of course, works for the BetMGM network, as we take a look at what's happening around the sports world and the numbers that are going on. Corey, first of all, you a golfer yourself? How's your golf game?
No, I do a lot of handicapping, but my golf handicap is not right now. I need to head out there and get some lessons because I wouldn't mind learning. Can be a very relaxing thing to do. So maybe they can hook me up with that. But outside of just me going in there raw, it's not really going to happen. As a matter of fact, I'll embarrass myself.
I was going to say the handicapping that you do is pretty good. So we'll leave you to that, I guess.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And listen, we are deep into March now. Matter of fact, headed into April, we'll know who the Final Four is in the men's and women's tournament this weekend. So definitely exciting times around Columbia and the nation in general.
Yeah, last night, obviously, action-packed games. You had Florida, Duke, Alabama, and Texas Tech, all the higher seeds winning their respective games, advancing on to the Elite Eight later on this weekend. We'll get the second set of Sweet 16 games coming up a little bit later on tonight. And as we kind of look into the numbers from the BetMGM network, no surprise, you still have Duke coming off their win last night against Arizona as the favorite when it comes to winning the entire thing.
Yeah, no, Duke does look like the favorite, playing strong right now. Flag fully healthy. He's rolling. This is a team that has the athleticism, the tenacity to get after it on defense. They can shoot well enough to cut down the nets and win the whole thing. Going to be interesting, though, to see when we get to some of the stiffer competition, what they look like. And let me tell you, there's nobody really as stiffer as them. It's a Final Four team that could cut down the nets, but I'm not so sure about that quite yet.
So they'll take on Alabama coming up this weekend in the Elite Eight. Alabama is 5th overall in odds to win everything when it's all said and done here in a couple weeks. Should Alabama beat Duke this weekend, would that skyrocket them to the very top?
Yeah, well, I still think that Auburn would be the team to move up and have the shortest odds to win. If that was the case, Florida is a team that people are starting to fall in love with. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but I do think that Auburn would be the team that would get the advantage.
Florida's an interesting team, and I think back to when South Carolina played them a couple months ago, and Carolina led that game pretty much for 39 minutes and 55 seconds before losing it there in the last couple seconds. So Florida can't have an off day, but when they're playing their best basketball, they truly do look like one of the, if not the best teams in the entire country, and they come in with the second best odds behind Duke at plus 275 to be the national champion.
Yeah, no, the Gators have been tough this year. Kind of a team that's set up the way the great Gator teams of the past have been. That SEC toughness, their grit, and the athleticism. What you're going to see from Florida is, though, can they continue to keep it going till deep in the tournament? So far, they look like they can get that done.
A little bit lower on the list of odds here. And again, they'll play the first game taking on Ole Miss coming up later on today at 7:09 on CBS. Michigan State sitting at plus 250. And, when you have a guy like Tom Izzo that's been there for as long as he has, you almost kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, right? Obviously, very good tournament coach. Has been there and done that before. And they're not necessarily the favorite for a lot of people to win the national championship. But them going on the run here in these next couple of games and pulling the whole thing off wouldn't be a shock by any means.
No, and listen, March, the January, February Izzo, and we're seeing him do it again. Kind of reminds me, Tyler, of, Syracuse or the Jim Boeheim era. One of those type of teams that when they get in the tournament, they got a head coach that knows how to win in these high-pressure situations. Michigan State is a team that's always capable of going on an NCAA tournament run. I don't know if it's a national championship team. I don't think the team is as talented as some of their teams that have gone deep in the past. But Michigan State with Tom Izzo is definitely a team that's going to be a tough out.
So the number 1 overall seed going in the tournament, again, talking to Corey Parsons of the BetMGM Network, doing the running the numbers segment as we do each and every Friday. Obviously, Auburn, the number 1 overall seed coming into the tournament. I thought the biggest hurdle for them was getting past the first 2 rounds, because that's been the Achilles heel for Bruce Pearl these past couple of years since their Final Four run back in 2019. They got past that. They look strong. They look dominant. They're taking on a very good Michigan team coming up later on today. Again, I had them in my bracket getting bounced in the Elite Eight, or excuse me, in the Final Four by St. John. St. John's is out of the question now. I mean, I really think they're kind of looking, in my opinion, is maybe one of the favorites to win the entire thing now.
Yeah, definitely can see that team cutting down the nets. As far as I'm concerned, they've been either the best, second best, maybe let's see top 3 teams in college basketball, really each of the last 2 seasons, but definitely that being the case this season. I mean, they're rolling right now. It's a team playing with a lot of confidence. Putting something on them to cut down the nets at that number is not a bad investment at all.
Take a look at some of those games that are happening later on today. You get an inter-SEC battle between Kentucky and Tennessee. That game at Lucas Oil Stadium out in Indianapolis. Tennessee sitting as a 4.5-point favorite heading into that one.
Yeah, now this one right here is definitely going to be a very interesting contest. So you got Tennessee and Kentucky, these old SEC rivals, right? And Kentucky has played Tennessee well this season. I believe have 2 victories over them. Now, the Volunteers are a better, more experienced team. I think Kentucky's run comes to an end, but I think it's a 1-possession game. I'll take them to cover the spread. Another thing that you can always do when you're wagering on these big-time college basketball games, especially a weekend like this weekend, you can find game props that the game will go to overtime. A lot of times you can get them as high as 10-1 odds. Games like this can go to overtime. Rivalry, familiarity with the team. This way, it doesn't even really make a difference who wins the game. If you hit that overtime wager, you're in the red. You're in the green.
Another game that's going to be the nightcap coming up tonight at 10:09 on CBS. Got Purdue and Houston, two of the more well-seasoned programs when it comes to these kind of deep tournament runs. And you have currently right now Purdue is a pretty heavy favorite at 8.5. Or excuse me, Houston is the favorite at 8.5. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest spreads of the weekend. Definitely the kind of spread you don't expect to see as we get this deep into tournament play, especially with teams with these type of history and these type of ratings. Seeds coming into the tournament. Now, with that being said, I think it's justified because when you look at the Cougars, it's all about defense. It's about defense. It's about health, and this is a run that I think that they've been trying to make the past couple of years. Now, we know that Purdue can keep it close. They score with their bigs. They're good on the perimeter. They're going to get after it defensively as well. But Houston has just been so relentless. They have enough bodies to throw at you. I think the game is close, coming down the stretch. Maybe you want to take Purdue in the first half, but I think Houston walks them down and pulls away and wins the game by double digits in the second half. I like this Houston team a lot. Solid, consistent, play defense, all-in mentality. The unit is the one player. I like what Calvin Sampson has done these past couple of years. I think the run is his.
Let's zero in on the women's side of things now as their Sweet 16 gets rolling a little bit later on today. Of course, our focus is on South Carolina taking on Maryland at 5 o'clock. Of course, the Maryland team that survived a double overtime thriller against Alabama the other day. They're already on a short day's rest. South Carolina did play on Sunday compared to them playing on Monday. And Carolina goes into this game as a pretty heavy favorite, one of the bigger spreads of the weekend at 17.5.
One of the biggest spreads you'll see in the Sweet 16 maybe ever. That 17.5 is a huge number. And I remember when we talked a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how you can look at South Carolina's number and it will kind of tint you to what the odds makers think. And the odds makers think this could be a 20-point victory by our Lady Gamecocks. Now, here's the deal. It's what it always comes down to. That talk about these McDonald's All-Americans. Well, Maryland just played a double overtime thriller. And South Carolina is coming from their home building fresh with 12 McDonald's All-Americans on the team. This is a depth matchup right here. Maryland can look good in the first quarter. South Carolina still has those explosive second quarters. Kind of reminds me of when the Warriors were on their run, how the Warriors would just come out and drill you in the third quarter. And Tyler, you'll hear the announcer saying, "Oh, this team is hanging close. This team is playing well," and they'll be down 15 points. We could see something like that today. I think a big time win for Carolina.
So I think it does benefit South Carolina that they did get Maryland as opposed to Alabama, because of course this game's being played in Birmingham. As far as the line being set, would they have kind of treated Alabama as a quasi-home team in that scenario if they'd gotten that draw instead?
Yeah, Maryland, it probably would have been about 12 or 13. You may have seen a little bit of a shift to the dog as far as the number being this high, but still, they still also came out that double overtime game. If you play 2 overtimes, the last team you want to see next is South Carolina.
That's very true. One other game I want to hit real quick before we get into some of the futures here. The nightcap for the Women's Sweet 16 tonight, 10 o'clock on ESPN. You got number 1 UCLA, or the number 1 seed in UCLA, taking on the 5 in Ole Miss. UCLA sitting at a 8.5-point favorite for that regional out there in Spokane.
Yeah, so here's the deal. I've been saying for the past couple of years that I think that Coach Yo's team, this Ole Miss team, was going to make a deep tournament run. Now it's unfortunate they get, one of the more elite teams in the country. Let's start off by saying this number's too big. I would definitely take Ole Miss first half, probably about 4.5. Ole Miss is gritty. Now, sort of like Purdue and Houston, what you're going to see happen is UCLA's talent is going to start to shine in the second half. I think this is a potential upset spot right here for Ole Miss. I like what they do defensively. I like how they're coached. Now, they are going against an elite team that can really light it up from the perimeter. If UCLA's shots are not falling, it's a good game to wager live. If UCLA's shots are not falling, then Houston can, Ole Miss can tip them today.
And lastly here, we'll take a look at the latest futures for when it comes to just making the Final Four here. UConn, the overall favorite, South Carolina, UCLA, Texas. Of course, you can look at those top overall seeds there. And then when it comes to the national championship, UConn's still the favorite to win it all at plus 135. South Carolina sitting at number 2. And when we talk about the women's tournament, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty chalky. You really don't see any seeds outside of the top 3 ever winning this thing anyway. I mean, is there any chance, in your opinion, for any surprises in these next 2 weeks?
Texas, depending on what they can do. Other than that, I don't think nobody is ready to step up and stop what I think we all knew were coming at this time last year when Iowa eliminated them. And I was like, okay, well, next year, get ready for UConn and South Carolina. That has been the matchup that we all think is going to happen. We saw what happened earlier this year at CLA. And, UConn right now is the favorite, which is rare, especially for us, knowing that what we got right there in our backyards. Now, with that being said, Texas is the only team that can sneak in that potential matchup. I worry about some of these slow starts, and I worry about some of these offensive lapses that Carolina tends to have, and UConn can exploit that. Now, that game at CLA was an outlier, but in a potential NCAA finals matchup, I would say UConn would be a 2-point favorite.
It's an exciting time, certainly. And, man, this time next week, we're going to be talking about the men's and women's Final Four and see who's going to be crowned a national champion in a little over a week. Appreciate it as always, Corey.
Good times.
Absolutely. Corey Parson from the BetMGM Network with our Running the Numbers segment, which we do each and every Friday. Coming up next, we'll talk with our guy, Joe Machika, who is live in Birmingham, getting set to cover things for theBigSpur.com. We'll get his thoughts on South Carolina women as they get set to take on Maryland coming up later on today in the Sweet 16. It is the Extra Point Tyler Head live at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia, the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic, benefiting Lexington County Gamecock Club here on The Game. What's up, man? Good to go?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Sweet.
And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head live here at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 1-7-5 game Spring Golf Classic benefiting Lexington County Gamecock Club. Again, things got rolling about almost an hour ago. All the golf carts headed out and everybody out on the course for this beautiful day of golf here at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Time to talk some more Gamecock women's basketball with our guy Joe Machika from thebigspur.com. Joining me live from Birmingham. I've been asking people all morning long, how was your golf game personally, Joe?
My golf game's decent. It's not great, Tyler. 93 is a decent day for me. But a career low of 84. So, trying to keep it within that range. It's not bad. And, I don't mind. I mean, if I'll play with really anybody, depending on how good or bad you are. Any
correlation between lacrosse and golf as far as one game helping the other?
Not really. I mean, kind of the motion you turn the hips, when you're moving through the ball. But nothing really. Played hockey a little bit growing up too. Kind of in the backyard just with friends and stuff like that. So a little correlation there. But yeah.
Well, you got bigger things on your mind this weekend than golf. That, of course, being the women's Sweet 16 out there in Birmingham. 11th straight time South Carolina has been this thing, and you almost kind of take it for granted, right? It's like, okay, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do, and they're looking at yet another trip to the Elite Eight, yet another trip to the Final Four, yet another shot at a national championship. I've been imploring people all week long, savor this as much as you can because you don't know how long it's going to last. But man, what a run this has been, and another chance to go out there and make history once again this weekend and through next weekend as well.
Yeah, Tyler, absolutely. Looking for their 5th straight Final Four. It would be incredible. And then on their path for their 3rd straight national championship. This team certainly isn't taking it for granted, especially as seniors, these veterans that came up clutch, certainly against IU. Bree Hollis and IFA and Raven Johnson were all great in that game. And they are, kind of leading the way with the attitude of not taking things for granted, being on the big stage, appreciating it for what it is and being able to play basketball in front of, big crowds and broadcasts all over the country. So certainly not taking it for granted internally. And, it can be easy to, from the outside looking in, because again, you're right, Tyler, it's just another weekend in Birmingham, right? You get comfortable with going to the Final Four when this is potentially your 5th straight. So it can get easy to overlook it, but I would think they need your support for those that are going to Birmingham today.
And we've talked so much again this year. You've had 3 losses, and South Carolina, for the most part, has looked a lot better after those losses, as using them as kind of learning experiences. And that's something that Don talked about a little bit yesterday when talking to the media. And while it was not a loss, you did have some quote unquote adversity against Indiana by being down at halftime. Obviously came out, had the phenomenal 3rd quarter led by Chloe Kitts, and ended up picking up a pretty comfortable win there. So South Carolina did have a little bit of adversity to overcome at some point in this tournament with that game against Indiana that could potentially, especially considering the fact that, Maryland played that slog of a game against Alabama going into double overtime, could benefit them to come out hot tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. You always want to start out hot in the NCAA tournament. This team was able to respond against Indiana. I mean, they shot 23% in the 1st quarter, responded with 50% in the 2nd. So it's an easy way to clean up your mess, when you come back out in the 2nd quarter and then eventually do what you did in the 2nd half to hold on to that game and win by 11 as you did. So that was big. This team is locked in again to be tested like you were against Indiana. Certainly can use it as motivation. As good as you are, it can be hard to find motivation. Indiana gave them plenty, and then also being challenged like you were against Indiana can also be some motivation as well going forward with that. So plenty to like, in terms of the motivation and what you want to do to continue momentum going down the stretch in the NCAA tournament.
Well, in that Indiana game, as much as your offense is important, obviously, it was really the defense that was kind of the story of it. You mentioned Bree Hall. You mentioned Sanaya Fagan. Dawn Staley rightfully so gave a lot of love to Tahina Paopao, who gave perhaps her best defensive performance of her entire college career out there on a Sunday afternoon to the tune of 4 blocks and 2 steals in that one. And again, we kind of expect those kind of things from Hall and Fagan and stuff like that. But, man, when you can have some of your players that came in like a Paopao with offensive prowess that's developed to the point of being able to play defense as well as she has. When you can have anybody in your roster on thread on both sides of the ball, that's what makes a championship level team that we've kind of come to expect with South Carolina.
Yeah, Tyler, most definitely. Paopao getting inducted into the seatbelt gang, the defensive group that they have, those that take pride in their defense. It's been big. Bree Hall inducted her, I guess, this weekend for 4 blocks from a guard. Pretty impressive from Paopao. So pretty special for her to be in that. And then also, on the flip side of things, talk about players who have been stepping up on defense. Talk about players who stepped up on offense. Bree Hall, she's been praised for her defense all season long, being able to guard the number one threat on the opposing team's offense. Bree was able to, get the job done offensively against Indiana too. Kind of show, along a bunch of players have been doing it recently, but just show the other side of their game is there, and everybody can do just about everything, Tyler, which makes it tough to beat.
So we turn the attention tonight, taking on Maryland in the Sweet 16. Dawn Staley yesterday, talking to the media, gave her scouting report on the Terrapins. Cut number 14, Dave.
Not similar in their personnel, but similar in how they play. I think Brenda has this team. This is how she wants to play. And when you're able to play your style of play, you feel comfortable going into every basketball game. They will shoot the 3 ball. They will drive it down your throats. They got some bigs that can command the paint. They play up and down. They get up and down the floor. They want the game in the 80s and 90s and hundreds if they can. So I think it's very similar in the style of play, just different people. And she got some players out of the transfer portal and made herself a team, and they got great chemistry. I think that is super cool that you can bring in as many new players and get them to gel. Super cool, and happy for Brenda for that.
And, these are 2 programs that have seen a lot of each other over the years, didn't play in the regular season this year, but have in plenty of the years past. And South Carolina's gotten the better of Coach Freeze's crew over these past handful of years. But she's right. They're a scrappy team that can give you a lot of fits in a lot of different ways. And, Cheyenne Sellers, who we talked about a little bit earlier, she's been on this team for many years and has seen South Carolina many times. And she's obviously one of the leading forces on offense, 28 points in that win against Alabama the other night. You got Kubek, who can go out there and grab rebounds. Tabiasu got 26 points of her own in that game against against Alabama the other day. She's a threat from 3 as well. So they do have, and again, when you get this far in the tournament, you're going to be a team that can attack opponents in a lot of different ways, and they're certainly one of those type of teams.
Yeah, most definitely, Tyler. I think if, Maryland stays true to their identity and, like Dawn said, kind of going after, the scoring column, this South Carolina team, is kind of licking their chops based on what they've been able to do defensively. They've been able to, extend points, in the fast break, and points off turnovers has been huge. When a team, kind of comes into this, being led by their guards in scoring, it tends to lead towards, South Carolina's guards, getting the tipped pass, finding each other in transition, getting the odd man rush on the break. So I would think, Maryland, they bring in a lot of different things, obviously, but it's guard heavy, Tyler. So I think South Carolina's guards, watch out for Wiley, Braven, the defense to lead to more offense today.
And I think the other day was a prime example, talking about that double overtime game of this team you're going to have to put away. You cannot allow them to be in this game late because they have that resiliency to make trouble for you, obviously. And again, South Carolina, the 17.5-point favorite. And again, Maryland was down by 17, I believe, in the third quarter of that Alabama game a couple days ago, was able to claw back. So you can never get comfortable against a team like this. And again, we've seen in plenty of times past, like Indiana last year, where Carolina had a big lead and they ended up, making that tighter than we thought they would. So you're going to have to keep your foot on the gas the entire 40 minutes today against this Maryland team.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I think similar to IU, right? I think if you slip up at all, the mistakes are going to show themselves, right? You're too far along in the NCAA tournament to have mistakes kind of disappear. And, credit South Carolina too, again, shooting 50% in that second quarter made that mistake go away pretty quickly. But again, if you're not careful and, tend to get in a rut this time of year, you're going to lose and go home unhappy. So you got to be careful. You got to make sure that you're on your P's and Q's. Luckily for South Carolina, this team has been locked in since the start of the NCAA tournament. So, looking good for South Carolina rolling into things here in Birmingham.
Take a look at the rest of the bracket and the storylines as the Women's Sweet 16 gets rolling a little bit later on today. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head here at the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic at Charwood. Joe Machika joining us from Birmingham, getting set to cover the Women's Sweet 16 for BigSpur.com. It is the Extra Point here on your Friday on the game.
All right, cool.
Sweet. Sorry about your Braves.
Nah, it's all right. It's one game.
Yeah.
Congrats to the White Sox.
Thank you. It was a good day in Chicago yesterday.
Won't be 0-1. Won't be 0-162.
Yep. The Bulls won. Josh Giddey hit a half-court shot to win.
That's right. Yeah, they replayed that about 20 different times on SportsCenter this morning.
Yeah, I don't want to say it, but I think I'm seeing a little red.
That's okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Guess good night overall in the Windy City.
Yeah. Derrick Rose threw out the first pitch of the White Sox game. You can't lose. That's
and
why they won.
Actually did a good job.
Yep.
Was that his son that threw out? He threw one out too. And actually did.
Yeah.
He got it to the plate.
Yeah. Solid. Yeah. I know. I was joking with everybody here in Birmingham. I'm just like, yeah, I've got to enjoy this, man, because I only get 50 more of them.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, the Will Venables experience, I guess. And then whenever somebody at a better ball club gets fired, and then they're like, oh, wait, hey, he's kind of talented.
Yeah.
And hasn't gotten fired in Chicago yet.
Yes. It's a long season.
Yeah, right.
We're all somewhere else.
Hey, Dave, I'm going to call for cut number 11 here. Good.
How's Corey?
I'm good. Yeah.
Tyler Head broadcasting live at the Charwood Golf Club here in West Columbia for the 1075 Game Spring Golf Classic. Partnership with Lexington County Gamecock Club all afternoon long. Carts got rolling right at an hour ago. Beautiful day out here, by the way. Appreciate everybody that signed up. And again, all of our great partners that allow us to be out here. I'll tell you about some of those coming up here in just a couple of minutes. I think it's convenient, Joe, you're joining me during the Who Sprung a Leak brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection, who again are one of our partners out here, one of our whole sponsors out here for this this golf event. We got to give it to Alabama, right? The other day, springing a leak, letting Maryland back into that game, that scrappy team that ended up takes you into double overtime and obviously ending Alabama's hopes of running at a national championship. Hats off to Sarah Ashley Barker. She played her absolute guts out, but unfortunately, her team did end up coming up a little bit short there.
Yeah, absolutely. You weren't able to get the job done, Tyler, and so now you have to, face South Carolina in the Sweet 16. But we're able to get the job done and ruin the Alabama homecoming to Birmingham.
So as we look ahead or look around at the rest of the women's bracket for the Sweet 16 and going forward, we can't help but address what happened on Monday with the injury to Juju Watkins. And Dawn Staley yesterday, cut number 11 here, Dave, talked about that injury and its effect on not only this tournament, but the game as a whole.
Really tough. Juju's loved by all of us. Juju is raising and lifting our game up with how she plays, with cornering the market when it comes to NIL deals. She's a business herself, and to see part of that not be a part of our NCAA tournament, something's missing. There's a big void, and we were fortunate enough to be one of her schools in the end. I've kept in touch with her, her support system. I sent her a text out. The night of the injury, but it went green. So that means I don't have the right number. But her person sent me the right number last night. So I shot her a text last night.
So Southern Cal is still a 1.5 favorite against Kansas State for their Sweet 16 game. If they win that game, they're most likely going to be matching up with UConn Neely Date, where I imagine UConn's probably going to be the favorite in that game, as they're currently still the favorite to win the entire national championship. And it not only sucks from the standpoint of Southern Cal losing their best player, but women's basketball for this year losing what is likely its biggest star. And we've talked so much these past handful of years when you've had the Caitlin Clarks, when you've had the Angel Reeses, when you've had the Aaliyah Bostons, go back to Asia Wilson a handful of years ago. There's so much star power in the women's game. When you talk about interest in people wanting to tune in, Juju Watkins was somebody that made people want to watch, right? You didn't have to be a fan of Southern Cal to recognize her as the best player for this year in women's basketball. And to see her lost, especially this close to the finish line of what could have been a Final Four national championship level team in Southern Cal, it's unfortunate to see.
Yeah, Tyler, it really is. It's unfortunate for Juju, going down the way she did. USC was one of those teams that really, again, like you said, could have competed for a national championship. They were in the mix. This is one of the years where college basketball, as a whole was, there was a lot more parity. Say what you will about the men's tournament, not as many upsets, but women's basketball as a whole, a lot more parity going on. And so, she was good for the game of basketball. And so thanks to see her out. Godspeed for a fast recovery.
And what it sets up, whether it's South Carolina, whether it's Texas, UCLA, UConn, whoever ends up winning the national championship, there's going to be that Southern Cal can still win it, but even if they don't, there's going to be that kind of but, right?
Yeah.
But your team won, but Juju Watkins wasn't available for the Sweet 16 and onward, so who knows what could have happened. And that's not discrediting whoever wins the national championship, which we think South Carolina's got a very good shot at doing that. But that is going to be kind of the main point of conversation for a lot of people coming away from it is, but Juju Watkins was hurt in the second round.
Adds plenty more intrigue to next season, Tyler. If you look at especially what South Carolina could potentially be losing, and you factor in Raven Johnson's decision, right? It adds plenty more intrigue to next season and what Juju brings back to the table for Southern Cal and what they could potentially set up and get around her in the portal.
Well, and you also have to wonder, because again, you're an ACL, it takes a while. I doubt she's going to be ready by the beginning of the season when we have that huge crossover matchup which this year's in California, I believe, and then next year's in Greenville, between the two USCs, battle of USC supremacy, then she's likely not going to be available for that game either.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to get back in time for that. And again, if she is available, I would doubt that she's, going to be playing like a full, 30, there's no way that she plays a full, 28, 20, 29 minutes, so in time for that game. So yeah, I agree, and it stinks that she won't be available. But I mean, hey, with injuries of that nature and the nature of coming back, those two teams and the energy usually works its way back against each other. So I mean, you probably see them in postseason play somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as we look ahead to the Sweet 16, which gets rolling later on today, of course, our focus is on South Carolina and Maryland tipping off at 5 o'clock. Got Tobacco Road Women's Edition coming up before that at 2:30 on ESPN between North Carolina and Duke. Of course, South Carolina very familiar with both these programs, and we've talked about this side of the bracket being a favorable matchup for South Carolina across the board, and you would kind of lean towards Duke being the team that South Carolina is going to see in the Elite Eight should both teams be able to win, coming up today. And even that, again, once again, it's a favorable matchup for South Carolina.
Yeah, either way, Tyler, I mean, I think, this team they saw North Carolina twice last season, was able to get through both of those matchups. One of them was a lot closer than you would have wished. Up there on the Tobacco Road, rivalry road trip that they did last season. But again, Duke, obviously another team that you'd like to see too, because you got the better of them this year at Colonial Life. I'm expecting it's going to be loud in South Carolina's favor here in Birmingham today and through the rest of these two games. So, I'm taking South Carolina or leaning South Carolina, I guess, in this one. But we'll see. I would think Duke. You look at the guards who, there are a lot of players. Chloe Kitts kind of put the team on her back to take the team over the edge. There's a lot of players, in that locker room that are hungry to get another shot at Duke. Talk about another team that South Carolina learned another lesson from for that game being so close. So, favorable matchups for South Carolina in this Birmingham 3 or 2 regional.
A lot of big matchups in terms of star power elsewhere in the tournament. Again, Juju Watkins going down for Southern Cal, but you look at the other end of that bracket with Oklahoma, Reagan Beers, obviously, Paige Beckers, and UConn. Again, looking like the best team or the favorite as of right now in a lot of people's eyes. 15.5-point favorites in that 2-3 matchup that's going to be taking place coming up tomorrow to determine who's going to take on the winner of Southern Cal and Kansas State for the shot at the Final Four.
Yeah, Tyler, it's going to be interesting. I've got UConn in that one. I think the way that South Carolina played Oklahoma is going to give UConn the blueprint. They match up similar, especially in the post, in everything that Paige is able to do from a scoring standpoint. She's been rolling, shots have been hitting. So I think UConn carries momentum through that one.
And then one I know you're going to be very familiar with, Notre Dame, the 3, and TCU, the 2 on the other side of the Birmingham bracket, the side that Texas is the number 1 seed in. Of course, Hannah Hidalgo on the Notre Dame side. TCU's got Haley Van Lith as well as a host of others. So that game coming up tomorrow at 1 o'clock on ABC for the right to take on either Texas or Tennessee in the Elite Eight coming up later on in the weekend.
Yeah, that game, Tyler, is certainly going to be a fast-paced matchup. You look at the guards, have been leading the way for Notre Dame all season long. Same thing on the other side for TCU. It's going to be an interesting matchup. I think, both teams are similar depth-wise. Really, they go about 5 or 6 deep. They really, don't have a whole lot of talent on the bench quite yet. So it'll be interesting. I think the guards are going to get out and run, but, I'm taking TCU.
Last one for you here. Do you think South Carolina is able to cover the 17.5 coming up today?
17.5. Ooh. Yeah, I think so. It's, they got to get out and run. Can't start slow. Again, if you start slow, it takes a lot more effort to claw it back. So, I mean, you got to be up by at least, 10 or 11 coming out of the first quarter to feel good about this one going plus 17.5, you said? Yeah.
Yeah, 17.5. Again, you're talking about a Maryland team that is coming off a little bit less rest and playing an extra 10 minutes against Alabama the other day, so it makes sense. Got to show some love to you, though, for the White Sox, who, despite a disastrous last season, did start off 1-0 yesterday. So 106-2-0, still a possibility for your White Sox.
Tyler, I appreciate it. Us White Sox fans don't get a whole lot of love in this world. Any little bit helps. I appreciate you having me on the show every week, as always. So, man, hey, I'm gonna appreciate this one win for the White Sox because, as I mentioned off air, man, we only get 50 of them. So,
Take him take as many as you can. Enjoy
Yes,
as much
exactly.
as you can. Appreciate your time as always, Joe. And man, this time next week we'll hopefully be setting the table for another Final Four appearance for South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. Again, appreciate you having me on as always, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Absolutely. You too. He is Joe Michika from thebigspur.com covering the women's Sweet 16 going on this weekend. We'll come back and wrap up hour number 2 of the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia here in the game. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate it as always.
See ya.
See ya.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head out here at the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic, partnership with Lexington County Gamecock Club. Appreciate, as always, once again, our whole sponsors for this event: American League Protection, Empire Drywall and Construction, Nucor, and Southern Shores Dental. Appreciate all of y'all for being a part of this. We'll get back into more of the baseball discussion coming up top of the 11 o'clock hour. Kate Crenshaw going to join us once again, talk some Gamecock baseball and softball too. They got a lot of good stuff going on over there. But quickly, as we wrap up this hour, I want to hit one thing from Coach Maneri yesterday when he was speaking to the media, talking about dugout morale, because they're in obviously the midst of a tough stretch right now, and it's really easy to get down on yourself when something like that's happening. Cut number 4 here, Dave. This is Coach Maneri talking about dugout morale and trying to keep spirits up during this tough stretch.
Yeah. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm old. Okay. And I've been through just about every experience you can have. Fortunately for me personally, the majority of them have been very positive experiences in the business. But I've also been through some tough times too. I'm what you call a grizzled veteran, if you know what I mean. So I know that tough times don't last, but that tough people do. And nothing's perfect in this business. You don't have any guarantees. You have to earn everything that you get. And even if you're the very best, you still look what happened to Arkansas last night. Florida last night. I mean, go down the list. There's no guarantees in this business, and the only thing you can do is work with the kids, believe in them, make them believe in themselves, and go out there and play with energy and enthusiasm and hustle, and hopefully you've got the pieces that it takes to be able to win games. We've won every game we should have won, and we've lost all but one against teams that probably were, more advanced than where our program is right now. So now we just gotta rise up and just keep putting forth the effort and believing that it'll happen, and keep trying to win the game. And I keep explaining it to the kids, and along the way they're learning a lot of life lessons. Nothing is perfect in life. We all have our trials and tribulations. It's not a matter whether you're going to get knocked down. It's what you're going to do after you get knocked down. You're going to lay there and give up, or you're going to get back up on your feet and keep fighting. And those are the things I keep talking to the kids about.
It takes almost a perfect effort to be able to beat a team like this weekend in Tennessee. If there's any kind of hangover from the past couple losses that you've had, again, you're 2-6 in your last 8 games, and you're 1-8 against ranked opponents. If there's any kind of hangover from that, and you're not at 100%, and you're not playing your best baseball, you're going to get swept again this weekend. And then we're having a whole another bad conversation come Monday about how big of a hole this team has dug itself into. You got to find a way to win the series this weekend. It's vitally important for the rest of the entire season, because again, you can't afford to dip that much lower if you want any shot at the postseason and all the games you're gonna have to win between now and then to make that happen. Again, we'll dive back into this conversation, get a little more in depth with Kate Crenshaw coming up next, as again we get set for South Carolina and Tennessee coming up later on today. First pitch at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 6:45 for game number 1 between the Gamecocks and the Volunteers, which you can listen to right here on the Game. It is the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, still out here at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia, going until noon here in the Game. 11 o'clock. Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head rolling solo today. Once again, out here at the Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 game Spring Golf Classic in partnership with the Lexington County Gamecock Club. Again, a beautiful day for golf. Golf carts took off about an hour and a half ago. Everybody out on the course and hopefully having a good time out there. And appreciate everyone here at Charwood for allowing us to be out here once again as we get you set for a big weekend of Gamecock sports. Again, women's basketball in action later on this afternoon as they take on Maryland Sweet 16 in pursuit of yet another national championship, and a massive weekend for baseball as they take on the number one seed team and defending national champions in the Tennessee Volunteers. Joining me now on Love Chevrolet phone lines once again is our guy, Cade Crenshaw, who we've deemed our Diamond Sports expert. Cade, first of all, appreciate you taking your time. We ran a poll on our Twitter page a little bit earlier on this week, kind of gauging where our listeners were at when it came to this baseball team. And the winning result ended up being a lot of people saying they were checked out. That's a little bit extreme. I'm not quite there yet myself, but I can understand, especially considering how the past couple of weeks have gone, how people can unfortunately get to that point so quickly this year.
Yeah, Tom, first I appreciate you having me on. And, I understand why some folks feel that way because, of course, there is that inherent, recency bias. What have you done for me lately? And, type mindset for a lot of folks. And it's understandably so. You go get swept on the road and then you come back and then you lose your midweek game against top 25 North Carolina team. People seem to forget sometimes that winning's hard. It's hard to win. But South Carolina's still in the season. They're 17-9, and you and I are talking here this afternoon. It's not even April 1st yet. It's not time to press the panic button or anything like that. And especially it's hard to win in the SEC because you look at how some of these teams have started out, like a Texas A&M. They were preseason number one in the country, and I don't think they've won an SEC series yet. Then you look at Florida, who dropped the opener to Ole Miss last night. Florida hasn't won a conference game yet. So there's still some really, really good teams in the country that are struggling early on in conference play. So you can't get too, doom and gloom right now on March the 28th. A lot of baseball left to be played.
And I thought that was interesting when Maneri was talking to the media yesterday. He said point blank, like, hey, this SEC is harder than it was when I left a couple of years ago, after the 2021 season. So he's coming into something that maybe he wasn't expecting to be tough, and maybe it's even tougher than he thought it was going to. And look, we know there's a lot of talent on this team. The question becomes okay, can Maneri, with what he has, be able to maximize that to make yourself once again more competitive in this conference to be able to win enough games to get yourself into the postseason?
Yeah, and something you have to keep in mind, too, this team's been bitten by the injury bug these last few weeks. I mean, you talk about being down a starter in Dylan Eskew, right? For you to have a chance on the weekend in this conference, you have to have, some strong starting pitching. And you've lost Dylan Eskew. You lost him at Arkansas, and then Coach Maneri said yesterday he's going to be out for some time now, dealing with an injury to his oblique. So, that's going to hurt South Carolina. And then even preseason, you lose Eli Jersenbeck to season-ending injury. So automatically, you're down two guys that everybody wrote into the starting rotation coming into the year. So that hurts you. So you're having to move around your pitching staff a little bit. Not to mention you lose Nolan Araki too. He's a bat that they had a lot of confidence in coming in after he transferred in from Clemson. And Coach Maneri said he's probably going to be out for the season too. Dalton Mayshore's missed a good amount of games, but he's now back fully healthy. And, you lost Thomas Lecor there for a little bit. You've been without Kennedy Jones for a little bit. So the injury bug has bitten South Carolina really at a bad time as you start league play and against the best competition you're facing all year long. But yeah, you're right. It takes time. I think everybody just wants to win right away. And people forget that sometimes this transfer portal issue now across the country where teams can just flip it around in 1 year, that works some of the time. It doesn't work everywhere. Coaches still get fired every year in every sport across the country because people don't give people enough time anymore. You look at, Ray Tanner in his first season at the helm here, people forget 1997 did not go extremely great, but I think it turned out okay for Coach Tanner. I'm glad the university gave him some time because it turned out he learned to win some games and he knew what he was doing. So I think right now you just have to give this team and this program some time and understand that because of what they're up against for the next, what is it now, 7 more weeks, it's a tough stretch to go through in this league.
Speaking of injuries, have you ever seen a take the ball off the top of the head in the bullpen during batting practice that leads to an oblique injury before?
I have not. I have not. It's one of those weird things. It kind of just fits with how this year may go and has gone so far for South Carolina. Just weird, unfortunate events. Sometimes it happens. It's one of those BP injuries where there's fly balls all over the place. Sometimes they hit somebody. Unfortunately, it hit a guy that means an awful lot to this team, and it would be a big part of their success as a no doubt weekend starter.
Again, talking to Kay Crenshaw about Gamecock baseball getting set for the weekend series against Tennessee. And with that SQ injury last weekend, that led to Jarvis Evans being thrust in the starting role on Sunday. Went out there and did a very solid job on short rest, and had the team in the game when he left the mound. About halfway through that game, and he's going to get the Saturday start coming up tomorrow with McCoy moving up to being the Friday night guy. And Jarvis Evans is kind of like the small glimmer of hope that you have as of right now that has been consistent, has been solid even through these struggles these teams have had over the last couple of weeks. And who knows how much differently Tuesday could have gone if he was allowed to pitch that game instead of having to be thrust in that Sunday role. So I am really intrigued to see how he does against this powerful Tennessee lineup coming up tomorrow.
I am too. I think, and I think we have to split this conversation into two, because part one of that is for Jarvis Evans. This was a player that I thought pitched really, really well in the midweeks of the, complete non-conference schedule before SEC play began. And that even led to me talking with Coach Maneri in one of our pregame interviews of me asking him, is this a guy that maybe moves into the weekend rotation for you? And at the time, that was heading into the Georgia State matchup, mid-March. When they played them on a Wednesday night. And he told me then, he said, look, we really are kind of working him to be our fourth starter, because if you're going to have success in this league, you really need four guys. Plus, when you get to a regional, you need four guys too. So, if you have postseason aspirations. So Coach Maneri understands that, and that's what he was trying to build Jarvis Evans up to be. And I think he would have fit that role really, really well. But now, like you said, due to injuries, some shuffling on the weekend, he's been moved around. And like you said, last Sunday he pitched in Arkansas. This Saturday he's going to go against Tennessee. And no doubt, and I think that leads us to part two of that conversation of, like you said, this powerful Tennessee team. 23-2 on the year. I say it's hard to win, but they do it an awful lot up there in Knoxville. And obviously they hit for power. I mean, there's no doubt about it. 61 homers on the year. They've got over 110 extra base hits as a team. So it's a team that brings a lot of power. Now, keep in mind, a lot of those extra base hits and especially the home run numbers may be skewed a little bit because of the shorter porches there at Lindsey Nielsen Stadium in Tennessee. So that works into South Carolina's favor a little bit more, having more of a pitcher-friendly ballpark at Founders. So you have to keep that in mind. And plus, of Tennessee's 25 games this year, they played 19 of them at home. So they haven't played much on the road in anti-hitter ballparks, if you will. So that'll be something interesting for me to see, too, is does the power translate for Tennessee this weekend?
Well, that's all the more reason why you're going to need a good and raucous crowd at Founders Park this weekend to make that environment as tough as possible for a Tennessee team that hasn't been on the road as much. They dropped one game against Alabama last weekend, but again, kind of unfortunately, it kind of goes hand in hand with how this team started off the season so far. I don't know if you're going to get the full allotment of fans as excited as they would be otherwise with how this team struggled as of late coming up this weekend.
Yeah, you certainly hope people will come out to the ballpark, and you have to put aside what the last four games have been, and let's not forget, the first 20 or so. South Carolina really started out strong this year. You had good crowds at the beginning, and don't let recency bias skew that. It's a great opportunity to come in, and South Carolina has taken well to number one ranked teams that have come in the Founders League the last few years. A couple years ago, a guy named Paul Skeens came here and pitched, and Ethan Petrie hit a first inning home run off of him. In front of a packed crowd. And that was a huge, huge momentum boost in that series. And then a couple years ago, this would have been his freshman year, Matthew Becker makes his first career start against number one Texas and strikes out a career-high 11 guys. South Carolina being at home, if you have more of a comfort level, you get more in your usual routine. You're not sitting on a bus or, waking up in a hotel or anything like that. You can just get back to your routine. So good opportunity here this weekend for the baseball team, and hopefully the fans come out and support it.
Well, as cliche as it sounds, this kind of feels like one of the weekends where Paul Maneri, quote unquote, earns his money. Again, you were brought in here with the cachet and the resume of having won national championships and been to Omaha, taking down plenty of highly ranked teams, number one teams in the process of doing that. You got to find a way to make something happen this weekend. Because again, if you come out of this sitting at 1-8 in conference play, that's a huge hole that's going to be tough to dig your way out of in the back half of the SEC slate. So you got to find a way to make something happen this weekend. And again, you hope that the veteran experience of 4 decades of coaching baseball and Coach Mary is something that you can play to your advantage this weekend.
You certainly do, Tyler. You hope for a good result this weekend. Heck, you love a series win or a sweep, no doubt about it. Everybody would. That would certainly change the outlook of a lot of people on this team. But like you said, Coach Fanera was brought in here to get South Carolina back to Omaha. And I think part of that conversation, too, was nowhere when he said we're going to get back to Omaha, that sentence in with this year. Because I think he understands it takes time to build a team and really build out a roster the way he'd like. So that may take some time, and but he was brought here just because of his knowledge of building programs. He built up Notre Dame. He worked his way through at LSU and so on and so forth. So this is a guy that understands baseball more than any of us probably could ever think of. He knows it. So you trust what he's doing, you trust what he's building, and you trust what the process will be this year for South Carolina, because that's what it's going to be. Every year is a process. It's just that process for some teams includes more wins than others.
One more before we let you go here. The other Diamond Sports softball, huge win, 6-0 shutout win over Clemson the other night. You were on the call for that one, and then they go on the road this weekend for a huge series of their own, taking on the number 3 LSU team as they look to fare just a little bit better than they did when they had that road trip out to Norman, Oklahoma a couple weeks ago, where they ended up having 1-run losses against the number 1 team at the time in Oklahoma.
Yeah, a huge win for Coach Chastain Woodard in that group on Tuesday. That was a shutout is always a good way to win. You shut out your rival. I know means a whole lot more, especially to the people in that clubhouse and in that locker room for having their connections to being a Gamecock. But I mentioned it on the call on Tuesday, but that was first time Clemson had been shut out all year, and first time they had been shut out in a year. And they had gone 54 straight games dating back to last season and not being shut out. So, that was a tough team. That's a Clemson squad that's going to be in the postseason. So a huge, huge RPI boosting win for South Carolina. Not to mention they got rivalry bragging rights, which always goes a long way. But yeah, like you said, they get back to league play this weekend. And I think for a lot of people looking back at that Oklahoma series, you can view it either as just a sweep or you can view it as, hey, you played really well. And I view it more the latter, right? You take the 3 losses, but you were in all 3 games. I believe you had a lead in all 3 games. And Coach Chastain Woodard has spoken to me about just wanting to see more maturity from her team coming off of that series to maybe hold on to those leads a little bit more. But that was a tough opponent up there in Norman. It doesn't get any easier. We talk about how strong the SEC is in baseball. I think last count I had was 9 teams, and softball's top 25 is from the SEC. So yeah, you got a top 11 showdown this weekend, a big road trip for Coach Chastain Woodard and the squad, and I know they're looking to come away with a positive result.
It's going to be a big weekend on all fronts for all Gamecock sports. Kate, I appreciate your time as always, and I'm sure I'll be checking in with you next week or the week after that.
All right, sounds good, Tyler. Thanks.
Absolutely. Again, Kate Crenshaw, you can hear him on the call for Gamecock softball as well as select Gamecock baseball games as well. We'll talk more baseball at the bottom of the hour with Russell Smith from Fox Sports Knoxville, get some insight into the Tennessee program coming up at that point in time. But going to dive back into some football stuff coming up next, talk a little spring practice and where Lenora Sellers could be when the season rolls around. That's coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday here on The Game. And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head flying solo with you on your Friday here on the game, again at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic in partnership with Lexington County Gamecock Club. Again, beautiful day for golf. Appreciate everybody that signed up and for everyone for allowing us to be out here. I've eaten 3 onion sausages so far. They are phenomenal. Appreciate Rock Lucas for grilling those up for all of us. And it's obviously been a great time out here so far this morning. We are making our way through spring practice, week and a half in. Look, we've heard from Beamer, heard from assistants, heard from coordinators, heard from some of the players. Not a whole lot of headlines right now, which is a good thing, right? You know, we know there's a lot of positions that are open competitions as of right now that are going to persist throughout the spring, throughout the entire offseason. We're not going to know by the spring game here coming up in a couple weeks what the depth chart's going to look like necessarily. There may be a position or two that we have a better idea about, but for the most part, we're still going to come out of the spring with a lot of questions at a lot of these positions. One of them, though, is not quarterback, which is a good thing. Not that we had questions last year, but I mean, Lenore Sellers was ranked on a lot of those lists going into last season as, the 15th or 16th quarterback in the SEC because he was unproven, right? He had a handful of plays back in 2023, looked good in those plays, but that was against Furman and Vanderbilt and teams like that. So you can only glean so much. In the beginning of the season, we saw him struggle at times. We saw him kind of try to get his feet underneath him and try and find his rhythm. When he finally did in the back half of last season, obviously South Carolina went out there and went on the tear that they went on to get to 9 wins. And, now he's going to go into the season on a lot of lists, being looked at as a Heisman, front runner on a short list for that. Preseason, one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC and all those kind of things. And he still has room for improvement, though. He's not a finished product. This could be his last year in college if he ends up going out there and having a phenomenal year and, hopping into the draft this time next year. But he still has things that he needs to improve on and goals that he and Mike Shula are trying to hit through the springtime. I want to go back to when Coach Shula was talking to me the other day, fired up for me here, Dave, on the goals that he outlines for Lenore Sellers this spring.
Well, I think number one, our goal is to pick up where we left off at the end of the year, not at the start of the year, and just we looked at some things in the off season that mentally and physically, looking at defenses and getting your eyes in the right place a little bit quicker and making sound decisions quicker and things like that. And then also now, because of the newness of the young receivers and the guys up front, whether or not they're rising freshmen or underclassmen, or the guys coming from the portal, there's just getting a feel for how everybody communicates, reacts, plays. And in the meantime, I do think that he has done a good job. And yet he still has a lot to learn too. Just, that position, every position, but especially quarterback, there's so many different situations and outcomes and different looks that you can't practice them all. You try to present them all to them in the meetings and things like that, but they still come up different in the out there in practice. So you can't get enough of that.
Your first year as a starter at any spot, particularly quarterback, is going to be like drinking out of a fire hose, especially in the SEC. And I remember last year before the Old Dominion game, we had Aaron Murray on the show because Aaron Murray was on the call for that game. And, he talked about the comparisons to the start of his career at Georgia as a redshirt freshman in 2010 to what Lenore Sellers was doing, where you're taking on a mid-major opponent or a group of 5 opponent and then getting set to jump right into conference play after that. And you can kind of see similarities between how all those two things went for those two quarterbacks. So a lot of the first part of last year was just getting comfortable, right? Getting used to the speed of the game in the SEC. And anytime you jump up a level in any sport, the game's going to be faster. Games can be tougher because guess what? You're going to be going up against a higher level of competition than you faced when you were in high school and all that kind of stuff. And again, when you kind of look at the first half of last year compared to the back half, it was a lot of Lenore Sellers getting comfortable. It was a lot of Lenore Sellers figuring things out, creating a rapport with his wide receivers and his tight ends, and obviously, unfortunately, running for his life a lot when it came to the offensive line not being able to block the way that they needed to. But once he started to finally kind of gel and get things truly figured out, that back half of the season was so much better. Again, there's still steps to improve, as Mike Shula, laid out there. keeping your eyes downfield. Yeah, we know Lenore Sellers got great legs and go out there and make plays happen based on his athleticism, but keeping those eyes downfield so it's not just, okay, I'm going to cut and run once my second read isn't there. I'm going to start running, and then if Mazio Bennett works himself open down the field, I'm going to sling the ball, and instead of running for a gain of 8 yards, I'm going to sling the ball for a gain of 25 or 30 or something along those lines. It's those small little things. It's mechanical things that he's now improving on to make himself a better, well-rounded, all-around quarterback. Placement of throws, something else that can do some, can do some improving as well. There were plenty of times last year where Lenore Sellers threw the ball up, and it was caught by a Carolina receiver, but you kind of had your hands over your eyes, saying, that could have gone the other way. Last year, he had 19 turnover-worthy plays. So he put the ball in harm's way to some degree on 19 different times last year where they could have been picked off or whatever there. So those are the kind of things that you want to see improve, those numbers you want to see come down as he goes through his second full year as a starter and third year here at South Carolina. And again, if he goes out there and has a phenomenal year and is good enough to take off for the draft next spring, that probably means that South Carolina as a whole has a pretty good year themselves, which we certainly hope is the case. And I think it will also help him as well that there's no competition at quarterback this year. Where last year, and look, we knew it was kind of a foregone conclusion that Lenore Sellers was going to be the starter for the 2024 season, but every time you heard from Coach Beamer, it was, well, he's the starter coming out of spring. And yeah, Robbie's still pushing him and all this kind of stuff. The fact that I think you can go through spring practice with more of a clear head on not looking over your shoulder saying, oh, this guy might jump up there and take my job if I'm not doing good enough, you've solidified yourself as a starter. Like Lenore Sellers, outside of getting hurt, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, is not going to lose his starting job. So he can go through spring, summer, getting ready for the season, all that kind of stuff with hopefully a clearer mind because of that. And hopefully that benefits to playing better on the field when the season does end up rolling around. If anything, we talked about this yesterday a little bit based on Wes and Chris's observations out at practice with Luke Doty once again working with the quarterbacks. The only controversy in that room right now is who's going to be your number two. And I think it's easy to say, well, it's Air Noland, a highly touted kid coming out of high school, transferring from Ohio State. But think about it like this. If Lenore Sellers, again, God forbid, knock on wood, the whole 9 yards, this does not happen. But if Lenore Sellers were to get hurt, especially in an SEC game, are you comfortable throwing out Air Noland, who's not taking the college snap? Are you comfortable throwing out Dante Reno, who's only played in garbage time against lesser opponents and very few snaps at that? Or Cutter Woods, who's coming in as a true freshman? Honestly, you'd probably go with Luke Doty. Now, again, he's not your long-term solution. There's a reason he was moved to wide receiver and last year and kind of seemed to be heading that direction again this year. But as terms of a case of emergency break glass quarterback, Luke Doty would probably make the most sense in the short term, right? Now, by the back half of the season, if you feel like you've gotten comfortable enough with Aaron Nolan and he's developed to the level you want him to, again, assuming he's going to be the guy to take over as starter in 2026 or 27 once Lenore Sellers is gone, then yeah, you probably move on to him then. But again, God forbid, don't want this to happen. Nobody does, knock on wood, all that kind of stuff. If you have an injury or Sellers gets nicked up, it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. Again, he got hurt in the LSU game, missed half of that, and they set him out for the Akron game for precautionary reasons. You run into that scenario early on in the season, you could be talking about Luke Doty playing quarterback once again. You know what I mean? And you certainly appreciate him for, sticking around here, not transferring, and, squeezing out every ounce of eligibility that he has, but his willingness to be able to do that, right? To go from the quarterback room to wide receiver room, back to the quarterback room in case you do need him. So, again, I do think there's significance to him being with the quarterbacks again in case you do run in that scenario, which, again, we hope does not happen when it comes to Lenore Sellers. We'll jump back into the baseball conversation coming up next. Russell Smith from Fox Sports Knoxville going to join me on the other side to talk about this daunting task of taking down the number one and defending national champions in the Tennessee Volunteers. That's coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday here on the game. And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday morning here on the game. Again, broadcasting live at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Been a great morning so far, and should be a fun weekend of Gamecock sports. And one of the biggest things going on this weekend is, of course, the battle with the #1 team in the nation, the defending national champions, the Tennessee Volunteers. Join me now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines to get some insight into what's happening up there on Rocky Top from Fox Sports Knoxville is our friend Russell Smith. Russell, first of all, appreciate you taking your time this morning. Let me get this straight here. You got 2 teams in the Sweet 16, a top 10 softball team, a football team that made its first college football playoff appearance, the #1 team fresh off a national championship. Did I leave anything out? It sounds like this has been a pretty fun year in Knoxville.
Yeah, I think the golf team is having a really good year as well. I don't
okay,
know.
well, there you go. Golf team, too.
It's yeah, man, times are good on Rocky Top. I try and tell all our listeners, because you know how sports fans are. It's like, they're always wanting the next big thing. And it's like, look, the good old days are right now. Tennessee fans have earned this. I mean, it was a rough stretch there for a good 10 or 15 years between Philip Fulmer and Josh Heupel. And, you had some decent basketball years, but baseball wasn't even a thing on our radar that we even talked about here locally. And the women's program, Pat Summitt's program had fallen on hard times. So it's a fun week and a fun time of the year. And Tennessee fans are, for the most part, enjoying it. Some nerves tonight as Tennessee takes on Kentucky, but certainly excited about baseball as well.
Well, looking at this baseball team, again, national champions a year ago, tons of talent on that team. You had guys like Christian Moore and Billy Amick move on. And, of course, this team this year still very good, being the #1 team in the country, only recently having suffered some losses. How does this team talent-wise compare to the one that won it all last year?
Wow, it's a great question, and it's interesting because you look at some of these SEC teams that have won national championships lately, and it seems like they all take a step back the next year, right? The 2 Mississippi schools, I think, might have had losing records the year after they won their national championships. LSU was not the same team last year after winning it all with Paul Skeens in 2023. And so there's a natural inclination to think, this program is going to take a step back, but it just hasn't. They won their first 20 games of the season up to #1, just run ruling teams left and right. And they just have not taken a step back at all. You lose some really good players off last year's team, Christian Moore, Blake Burke, Billy Amick, guys like that. And it's a testament to Tony Vitello that he just never stops recruiting. He's probably doing it right now. And they have replaced those guys with some really excellent young players, and then supplemented that with guys from the portal like Gavin Keelan, who we might not see this weekend as he nurses a hamstring injury, but he's been Tennessee's best player. And he was an all ACC guy from Louisville last year who's come in and made a big impact. But Liam Doyle from Ole Miss will be the starter for Tennessee tonight on the mound, just a terrific player. And then Andrew Fisher, another Ole Miss transfer, third baseman, probably play first base tonight. Just kind of one of those all or nothing guys, strikes out a lot, but if he gets a hold of it, it's going to go a long way. So they compare favorably, I guess, is a long-winded way to answer your question, Tyler. A lot of talent on this Tennessee team, both on the mound, in the field, throughout the lineup, and they have been a handful for just about everybody they've run into. Lost a midweek game against ETSU last week in game 1 against Alabama, but were able to come back and beat the Tide twice to take that series in Tuscaloosa. But looking forward to a trip to Columbia. Never easy at Founders Park. A lot of respect, a lot of history for the Tennessee program with Paul Maneri going back to his days at LSU. So should be a fun series this weekend.
Again, talking to Russell Smith from Fox Sports Knoxville, again, perspective of the Tennessee Volunteers. Had the matchup with South Carolina baseball this weekend. And I know Coach Vitello was asked about this the other day in his media availability. This is a team that has not left Knoxville very much. They went to Alabama the other weekend, did drop one of those games. But again, the unfamiliarity of, kind of playing away from home is something that, I don't know if it's a concern, but what is kind of the question of having to go into a place like Founders Park tonight and take on a team in South Carolina that is searching for its foundation coming up this weekend?
Yeah, I don't know that the travel is necessarily a part of it. Here's the thing, and South Carolina fans will probably know this well after the back-to-back national championships that the Gamecocks won a couple of years ago, is when you climb the top of the mountain, you're defending national champion, you're number one, you're getting everybody's best shot, right? A couple of years ago when Tony Vitello and his program were just bursting on the scene, they were able to sneak up on people. That's not the case anymore. Everywhere these guys go, the crowds are sold out. It's feisty. People are chirping. A lot of fans in the stands and all that stuff. So you are taking everybody's best shot, and I would imagine that that's what South Carolina is going to bring tonight. Be interested to hear from you guys. Like, are we expecting a huge crowd? I know that it's year one of a rebuild and things haven't gone the way Gamecock fans, I'm sure, wish, but are we expecting one of those awesome Friday night SEC atmospheres tonight?
We were actually talking about this earlier. I think it's going to be a solid turnout. I don't know if it's going to be packed to the gills. We ran a poll on our Twitter page earlier on this week, and there's a lot of people that are already hitting the I'm checked out box with this team, considering the struggles they've had of late. So I don't know if it's going to be full throat like it's been in years past. We obviously hope it's going to be a good crowd because you're going to need that against a great team like Tennessee. But it may not be a record-breaking historic crowd that you maybe have seen in years past. I'll put it that way.
Yikes. That's tough, man. It's hard when you're rebuilding, especially when you've been to the top of the mountain like South Carolina has, and it's hard to be patient. And then you're playing in this league, man, and just the depth of teams and talent and great coaches and programs and hostile venues that you have to go into. So that's tough. But I think that there's a lot of respect, like I said earlier, for South Carolina and playing on the road. So hopefully it'll be a good series this weekend. I know that Gamecock fans want it. It's a beautiful ballpark there in Columbia, Founders Park. So should be exciting.
You were talking about transfers a little bit earlier, and Gavin Kylene, who's leading Tennessee in hitting, was a solid hitter when he was at Louisville. Didn't hit for a ton of power, 9 home runs a year ago, but has already blasted 10 so far this season. Is that the benefit of just playing in a more hitter-friendly park that he has in there in Knoxville, or has he just come that much further in his hitting in his time with the Volunteers?
Probably a little bit of both. Now, Tennessee went down to Houston and played in, I still call it Minute Maid, whatever they've changed it to down
Globe Life, I think. Globe Life Park.
Yeah, well, that's Dallas. I don't know. It's got some other name, but
that's right. Yeah, I forget the name of it now.
Yeah, it's got some new weird name, named after a yogurt company or something. But
okay, I gotcha.
Is it Yoplait Park? But anyway,
Keelan
hit a couple of bombs down there. And so, yeah, I mean, he might have had one or two that got out in Lindsey Nelson that were the result of that. But he's got some power, and Tennessee, part of their success, they've got a great strength and conditioning program, nutrition, and they really get their guys to buy into that. And then the hitting program is just, those guys are programmed to murder the ball. It's not a lot of small ball and moving guys station to station with Tony Vitello's program. They want to hit it hard, and Keelan has bought into that. He's added some weight, some muscle, and he's hitting a lot harder. Now, I said earlier, I don't know that we see him this week. He's missed about 2 weeks now with a hamstring injury, and they're being very careful with him. We're able to take 2 of 3 against Alabama last week without him. So I don't know. He will not. I would be stunned if he starts in the field. Maybe he DHs at the most, but Tony Vitello said, look, it's more likely that you see him in a pinch hitting role, if anything, this weekend. So my gut says that they're going to be very cautious with him. We might not see him at all.
Last one for you here. Got about 60 seconds. Is this series this weekend and the South Carolina team as a whole looked at any differently because Coach Maneri is at the helm? Again, they haven't gotten off to the start that people here in Columbia would have wanted him to, but he obviously has the resume and the history to back up him being successful. So from outside this bubble in Columbia, do you look at this team differently because he's now coaching it?
Yeah, I mean, you know that you're going to see a solidly managed team and program this weekend. So I think you have to respect that. Now, I'll give you a little backstory here real quick. There is some history here between Vitello and Maneri, Tennessee, and LSU. When Maneri, his last year at LSU, Tennessee put the nail in his coffin, beat him a couple of times in Knoxville, and this was before Tennessee had blown up. This is when they were on the come up, and then put them out in a regional in Knoxville to end his career. And Tennessee fans were giving it. That was a fun weekend. They were giving Maneri and his team the business. And Maneri had some quote. He called Tennessee fans some really ugly people or nasty people, I think was the word he used to describe it. So there's a little bit of bad blood there. I don't know that carries over now that he's at South Carolina, but Paul Maneri, not Tennessee fans' favorite manager, but that makes it all that much more fun, right?
I was going to say, should be a fun weekend out at Founders Park. I appreciate you taking your time as always, and we'll probably check in with you at some point later on down the line as well.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tyler. Y'all have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Russell Smith from Fox Sports Knoxville. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here at Charwood Golf Club on the Game.
We got a ways to go. There's a lot of good things, a lot of things we need to get better at. It's practice 3, so we got a couple more to go. So I'm just looking forward to those guys. They've done a good job of preparing themselves and getting ready to go every day. But just got to continue to progress, especially with the young guys.
And it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday here on the game as we wrap up today's edition of the show out here at the Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. I believe that was Markwell Blackwell talking about the progress of the running back room the other day, and certainly excited to see what's going to happen here coming up in the next couple weeks when it comes to Gamecock football as spring practice rolls along. Next week will be the second full week of it. Just kept past the full week mark. On Wednesday this past week is build up the spring game and obviously try and learn a lot about what that team's going to be. And again, we have high expectations for this upcoming season, and hopefully they're able to live up to that. And year number 5, which is crazy to think about, under Coach Beamer, can be just as good, if not more successful than last season was. So excited for all that. Big weekend in Gamecock sports with baseball taking on the number 1 team in Tennessee. Of course, women's basketball tonight taking on Maryland in the Sweet 16 as they look to continue to pursue yet another national championship. Final 4 weekends next weekend down there in Tampa for them if they're able to get through this weekend, beating Maryland and then beating either North Carolina or Duke, depending on who wins that first matchup there in the Sweet 16. So a lot of exciting stuff happening. Softball taking on LSU in a top 12 showdown in softball as well. That game or those games being out in Baton Rouge this upcoming weekend. Should be a fun night as well for basketball. Last night had plenty of cool games. When it came to the men's Final Four, you had Alabama just absolutely shooting the lights out. Mark Sears 34 points on 10 made 3-pointers last night to help Alabama pass a very good BYU team 113-88. Texas Tech survives Arkansas in overtime 85-83 to create, as crazy as it sounds, end the Cinderella run of John Calipari's Arkansas team as they were the lone remaining double-digit seed. So now I believe going forward, because Texas Tech, was the lowest seeded team to win last night. The highest possible seed that can continue on now is Ole Miss. They take on a second-seeded Michigan State today. You got a 3-2 matchup with Kentucky and Tennessee later on this afternoon or later on this evening. 5-1 matchup with Michigan and Auburn, and then a 4-1 matchup with Purdue and Houston. This goes back to something that we talked about coming away from last weekend, where there's a lot of people, the more casual viewers of college basketball, that were upset that there weren't a lot of upsets and crazy things that happened in week number 1. And while, yes, that does make maybe the first 2 rounds a little less fun because you don't have the chaos and craziness that you've had in years past, you get higher quality basketball in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, on into the Final 4, because you have most of your high seeds remaining, which is exactly what we have this time around. That's exciting to see, and I'm looking forward to it. Should be a good weekend basketball, men's and women's. And fingers crossed. You just heard Russell Smith from Fox Sports Knoxville talking about what we already know of how good this Tennessee team is coming in this weekend, and I sure hope Coach Maneri's team can find a way to win at least 1 or 2 games, just to get some kind of foundation back under this team for what's been a tough couple of weeks for them as this tough season hopefully can maybe get rebounded a little bit with how they play this upcoming weekend. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, it's Halftime Show with Terry Ford out at one of the holes here at Charwood Golf Club. Coming up next here in the game.